Hello and welcome back to Got Ahead. Now, I say welcome back, that's because we're assuming that you've probably looked at Creative QWERTY before now, which is the clip that we use to talk about the basics of the QWERTY stage thinking programme. If you haven't already seen that, feel free to go off and look at that first, or by all means stay with us, because what we're going to do is we're looking at all the 6 stages of the QWERTY stage thinking programme one by one. And today, what we're looking at is the question stage. Now, when we've looked at question before, we've said, define what you need to think about. So the first thing to think about is, what is your question? It's not necessarily an answer to a question with a question mark. It could be a design solution or coming up with a plan for something. But it's the task that you have to do at this stage. And you have to be very clear about what the task is. Let me give you an example. My daughter had to do a design and technology project which was linked with what they were doing in science. So they had to come up with a cafe scene in a shoebox and relate it to the topic of materials. So that was our question. We had to think, what are we going to do for this shoebox model and the materials within it? So when we come to the question stage, the first thing we do is consider, what do we want to achieve? What is our end result going to be? Because if we're flabby at this point, we'll get a flabby answer. So the tighter our question, the neater it is, the more we will know exactly what it is that we want to come out with at the end. So in our example, we had a shoebox, cafe scene, and information about the materials that it contained. That was the basic question. There are sometimes things that you don't need to think about. So we don't want you to waste your time thinking about non-essentials, wandering off and spending time that you might not have a lot of, thinking about things that you don't actually need to consider at all. Because, as I said before, it's creative QWERTY, but it's also effective QWERTY. It's efficient. You're using your time to best advantage. So you don't want to bother thinking about things that aren't necessary for your task. So in our example, we didn't need to think about having scale figures sitting in the cafe, eating and drinking. It was all about the cafe scene and the materials. Characters was non-essential. We didn't need to think about that. Excuse me. What must we consider in our answer? Now, this is what we call qualifiers, and we'll do another clip later on looking at qualifiers in more depth. But basically what this does is have you consider things within the task that you are doing. Now, some of those, your answer to it will be no, or a very limited answer. It doesn't matter, but what you need to do is at least to have considered those things. So in our cafe example, we needed to consider what kind of furniture. We needed to consider whether there would be a sales point of some sort. We needed to think, would the kitchen be on view? Now, the answer to some of those might be no. It might just be, tables and chairs. But we needed to at least consider them in our thinking to get the most effective answer to our question. So what we're doing at this point is we're plotting out our perimeter. We want to see what are our boundaries, really, for what we want to think. Now, these are guide ropes. Guide ropes. So there's nothing to say that you couldn't look out over the top if there's something interesting over there that's relevant to what you're doing at the moment. But on the whole, you're going to stay within the perimeter because that's more efficient in terms of your thinking. Later on, we'll talk about Forgetmenots. These are tools and tips that will relate to all the stages of QWERTY and indeed some of our other techniques as well. But the point is, they will help you look at things more deeply or from a different perspective. Don't worry about it just now. We will look at it again in the future. We just want you to know that it's there. So from today, what you want to do, you want to go on to the next stage, which is the wonder stage, and indeed to explore rank, target and ye, obviously, and indeed our clips on other subjects. You might also want to check out our website, www.gotahead.com, because we've got plenty more resources on there about QWERTY, but also other subjects as well. So we look forward to seeing you again. Good luck setting your question.